Welcome, everyone. My name is Carmen Mazzara, and I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. I am delighted to welcome all of you to the 4th annual APSIA Diversity Forum Workshop. This one's a little different this year, but that means that we are able to engage so many of you from all over the United States. I'm excited. This is the first of what will be a whole week of activities, and we have 3 great presenters and panelists to share their wisdom with you. Hopefully all of you saw the link to download your packet of information that has the bios on all of our speakers for the week, as well as a full agenda. So if you are searching for and hungry for more information on the great folks we have today, it is in here. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, please let us know. The link is also on the Eventbrite page where all of you registered. You'll also be able to see in this packet of information all of the sponsors who make this event possible. In particular, I want to thank the Open Society Foundations, Princeton University's Woodrow Wilson School, the Robertson Foundation for Government, Texas A&M's H.W. Bush School, and the University of California, San Diego School of Global Policy and Strategy. All of these institutions who've invested in this event make it possible for us to share this Diversity Forum Week with you. And so please learn about them in this packet of information as well. We are recording all of the events for this week, and you'll find them on the APSIA YouTube page, and you'll receive that link later. And we're also glad that this is the beginning, not only of the week, but of hopefully a long-term conversation and relationship with all of you, so that we're very glad to welcome you into the community of advisors who've been part of all of these Diversity Forum workshops over the years. And so with that, let's get started. I'm going to turn the floor over to Shamila Chaudry, and we will get underway. As we go through, if you have questions or other things you'd like to learn about, please feel free to put them in that chat box you see. And I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to the great wisdom that is our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Can Danica and Santiago, you can hear me okay? Good, wonderful. All right. Well, first, let me just thank Carmen and our friends at APSIA for inviting me and our guests to speak today. I know this is an issue that's really important to all of us, and it's great that we have so many people on the line that are interested in learning more. And I also hope that everyone is staying safe and healthy. And just so you know, I've kicked out my children out of the house. They are with my husband, so that there won't be any theatrics in the background, I hope. So, but I welcome theatrics from others. It's actually quite amusing, just not my own. So let me introduce myself really quickly, so you know my background if you haven't seen the bio. So I spent my whole career in international affairs. But I myself come from a community, of medical doctors and lawyers and engineers. I grew up in a Pakistani American household, and so there really weren't any role models for me to look to or to develop a path for studying international affairs, or even a career for that matter. And so I learned a lot on the way, and I'm always trying to find ways to share the knowledge and the lessons that I've learned, because now I see a lot more diversity, and I'm very thankful for that. But it doesn't mean that it's gotten any easier. There are always things that we can improve on and share. Okay, so folks are saying they can't hear me. Okay, hold on. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you, but and some in the
so
some of the attendees can.
Okay, so some attendees can hear and some cannot. Is that accurate? Okay. All right. So let me just ask Nellie Leon, who said that you can't hear the speaker, or Jacques Cando, can you hear us now? Probably not if they haven't replied. Okay. All right. Carmen, can we ask that you look into that? And I think probably we will. Okay, thank you. We'll see what we can do. All right. I will continue just in the interest of time. So anyway, I wanted to share that this is something that is very personally important to me. And I'm glad that we've got so much interest. So in terms of format, I'll engage the speakers in Q&A for a bit, and then we'll open it up to questions. And I'll ask that the attendees direct their questions into the chat box, and then I'll read them and address them to the speakers, okay? So first, let me welcome Danica Starks. She is a senior policy advisor in the Office of Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia at the U.S. Department of Commerce. She has an amazing bio, and I didn't know that you were a SICER.
I am.
Yeah. So folks, in addition to being an IR student, I've also worked at Johns Hopkins SICE for the past 6 years as chief of staff to the dean. And so I am well aware of all that goes into being on the administrative side as well. But if Danica went to SICE, then she's a rock star. And her bio definitely speaks to that. And I'm glad we have her because we don't often think of commerce as a place where you can practice international affairs. And in fact, there's a lot of very vibrant and engaging work being done over there. So welcome, Danica, and I'll let you go more into your bio in the first question. And then also welcome Santiago Bunce. He is Vice President of Evaluation and Learning at Catalyst Miami. And so you're based in Miami, Florida, correct, Santiago?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So Santiago is one of the smarter foreign policy practitioners who has moved to like a place where it's not a war zone or it's not like overly bureaucratic like DC. So you can have a normal and fun life, right? Even though Danica and I have fun in DC, obviously we love DC, right? So I love that we have Santiago because you represent a very diverse kind of path for foreign policy practitioners, and your experience shows the range of the skills that people learn in IR. So glad to have you. And I myself, I'm not going to speak too much about myself, but if folks have questions, like I spent 12 years in the government working at the State Department and at the National Security Council and at USAID, and I've done a variety of different policy roles as well. And I myself came from a humanities background, so I didn't intend to go into IR. I have an English lit degree. So, okay, great. So the first question that I'd like Danica and Santiago to think about is just tell us a little bit about your career path, why you got interested in international affairs, and like how you got to that point. And hopefully in answering that, you can tell us a little bit about the previous positions you've had and also the current roles that you assume. So Danica, why don't you go first?
Okay, so first of all, I apologize if I start freezing, in which case, Santiago, please start talking. My internet connection is lacking. So I actually knew I wanted to do international relations from the time I was 13 years old. And because of that, I actually started very young. My dad would find anybody he could who was interested in international affairs, and they sort of helped coach me through what I needed to do. So I actually even selected my high school because they had a magnet program in humanities and international studies. So my journey is a lot different than a lot of people. It was pretty intense. I knew exactly kind of what I wanted. I decided in terms of Russia and Eurasian studies and economics, I would say about junior year of high school. For those who are familiar, I was international baccalaureate diploma candidate. And I remember doing my IB history guided coursework paper on the Sino-Soviet American Triangle in foreign policy. And, I couldn't really research that in my high school library. So I went to GW's Gelman Library, which at the time, back in the 90s, was open. And I could just walk in and walk into their Sino-Soviet room. And I just knew then that I had found the area that I was going to start my career on. And based on that, that's how I picked American University for my undergrad. It was a top school for international affairs. I came in the first day to talk to my counselor, and I had all 4 years planned out. I knew I wanted to do a double major in international studies and economics and a minor in Russian and Eastern European studies. I knew I wanted to study abroad for a year, and there was really only one way to do all that in terms of fitting in all the classes. I'd also, I should say, started studying abroad when I was in high school, living in Spain and then in Norway. And then same for graduate school. SICE at the time, and probably still now, is one of the best graduate schools for international studies in the country. And that's how I knew I wanted to go. But funnily enough, I did not want to stay in DC But when I finally went to do my application, it turns out they had a campus in Bologna, Italy. I said, well, that works. And I ended up at SAIS, and through there, I applied for the Presidential Management Fellowship Program, the PMF, that I'm sure a lot of the counselors are aware of. I had already been working with the government through some internships that I had applied for, and I'd actually started my government service in NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, but it was through the PMF program that I got sort of my career job. And I would say that probably one of the fastest ways to get hired into the government, because you get non-competitive status, and you tend to promote faster. So that was really responsible. That was my track. And then, can talk later sort of how that went after that. But that was sort of how I got my beginnings.
Great, thank you, Danica. I'll have some follow-up questions for you. Really interesting path. Santiago, go ahead.
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. So my story goes like this. I was born in upstate New York, but have Argentine heritage. So my mother's from Argentina, and grew up with soccer. And with soccer, you grow up with nations and flags. And like when I was very young, I just got very interested in international cultures and different soccer leagues and different flags. And this kind of continued, through high school. I did the Model UN program, and just kind of always had this international component. I went to study at Boston College, my undergrad, and the international studies major was one of the few that you had to apply for. And I applied, and I was not accepted. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just go do a master's in it later. And I studied comparative theology. So I studied theology. I studied Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, and Islam. And that was kind of like a way I could kind of stay connected to an international and a varied and a diverse, learning environment while not doing international studies. And after that, I spent some time abroad. I lived in Ecuador. I lived in El Salvador. I had always been interested in Latin American culture because of my heritage, and really enjoyed that. And so I was always trying to connect back to it. I went to UC San Diego. I went to what is now called GPS, a Global Policy and Strategy School. At that time, it was called International Relations and Pacific Studies program, and studied international development, international economics, and nonprofit management as well. And knew I wanted to continue being connected to international communities, initially abroad and then now here in the United States. But from that time, and we can go deeper into some of these, but from that time, I worked for an international evaluation company that did evaluation for CSR programs abroad. Did a lot of work in Guatemala, in Haiti, and the DR, and Colombia through there. I then worked as an economist at an international development firm in DC for a while. Then worked for Loyola Marymount University, but was based in Argentina. And then, I appreciate, Shamila, the thought that maybe I'm smart for moving to Miami, but actually love brought me here. So a different kind of intelligence. And then my wife is Argentine, and we figured where's the best place for an Argentine family to grow, and Miami was one of them. So we found ourselves here, and was pleasantly surprised with the cultural diversity that's here, because obviously there's a lot of Latin American community, but there's a large Caribbean community as well, and some pockets of other communities, which we really enjoy and get incorporated significantly in my work, both here and as an adjunct professor at Lynn University.
Santiago, can you just quickly describe what your work is at Catalyst Miami?
Sure, absolutely. So Catalyst Miami is a nonprofit focused on low wealth residents in Miami-Dade County. So we serve our average client makes about $20,000 to $22,000 a year. The vast majority are either Haitian Americans or Haitian individuals. A lot of Bahamian and Jamaican community members. U.S. African American as well, and then a very large migrant population. So folks from Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, who are working in South Miami-Dade, which is where Homestead is, which is a lot of farmland. You may be familiar with Homestead because of Hurricane Andrew, but it's a huge agricultural center for the state. And so I oversee all the evaluation of micro level programs and macro level programs that are oriented towards these low wealth families and residents, and also help create a culture of curiosity in the organization, getting people to think about our work differently and how it can be more effective and efficient.
Interesting. And Danica, maybe let's go back to you really quickly. Also, if you could describe what your current position is, like what does somebody in charge of Russia and Ukraine and Eurasia do at the Department of Commerce?
Sure. So I head up the policy team. So for most jobs, there's an operations side. There's also a policy side. I cover the entire former Soviet Union, and I'm responsible for, I would say, widely 4 different areas. So I have a team of people under me that cover certain countries. And I should say also, I'm in the International Trade Administration of the U.S. Department of Commerce. And we're responsible for basically sort of being the State Department within the Commerce Department, meaning we are responsible for understanding all of the political and other situations regarding Russia and the region that could affect what the Commerce Department does and could affect U.S. companies. And so we keep the Commerce Department and senior officials informed of changes in government and other political issues that could affect the relationship. We also do the liaising with the National Security Council and others to make sure that we are part of the foreign policy establishment. Secondly, we have to U.S. companies. So we have clients just like other.
Danica has frozen for me. Santiago, is it the case for you? All right. I can't hear your sound.
It looks like we lost Santiago briefly. Let me see what I can do to get him back with the sound.
All right.
Always fun.
We can see him, but Danica is frozen. Is that the case for you, Carmen?
It is.
All right.
Looks like everybody's coming.
There you are,
she is.
Danica.
Okay, sorry. Uh-oh. Now somebody's.
I think that's just Carmen.
Okay, where did I leave off?
So you were talking about being part of, you're like the State Department within Commerce.
Yeah, the State Department within Commerce. We also help U.S. companies that are looking to export overseas. So while we don't necessarily support sort of U.S. companies moving investments overseas, meaning, moving their car, there are companies that export goods and services, but also in some cases need to physically be in a country to do certain business. So we help U.S. companies navigate that. We do direct services for companies in terms of matchmaking, finding them partners overseas, finding buyers for U.S. equipment. But also we do bigger business environment issues. So we are part of the U.S. government team that helps to negotiate trade agreements and other investment agreements with other countries. We help ensure, our role is to ensure that the experiences that U.S. companies are having, their concerns, are part of the agreement with foreign countries. And we also are there to ensure that the voice of U.S. business is part of the foreign policy discussion. So for those who may remember, when the Russians invaded Crimea and there were these big decisions about sanctions, part of our role was to try to do what we could to mitigate the effects of sanctions of U.S. business and to be the voice of U.S. business to identify areas that would have the least amount of impact, if possible, on U.S. business while simultaneously supporting U.S. foreign economic policy. And so then, so as a broad resource to companies and the government. So basically, people can call me and my team at any time and ask us everything from, when is the next presidential election in Azerbaijan to, what is the tax rate in Georgia, the country, to, I have a problem in Uzbekistan, I'm a cola bottler and, for example, and, the customs issue, can you help me? So everything from broad things to even the small sort of micro level we deal with.
Awesome. So what I think is really interesting about the combination of your experiences, and then I'll throw mine in there as well, is that we all kind of studied different things. We were in different disciplines. And I myself thought I was going to go to law school and thought English literature was the best way to prepare myself. But along the way, I got really interested in women's studies. And in my women's studies classes, I would read historical fiction written by women authors. And that got me interested in other countries and how, questions of development, because historical fiction looks at politics and conflict, but through the stories of people. And so I ended up going into international affairs without the same kind of training that Danica had. I had no foreign language skills. I really hadn't traveled overseas, and I didn't have any economics. But I, long story short, I made it work, and it ended up okay. But my question to both of you is, in hindsight, given what you know now and what you've studied, what would you, advise people, the advisors on the call? Like, what would you advise them in terms of sharing with their students what they should study, or what majors or interests they should pursue that would best equip them for a career in international affairs?
Yeah, if I could share. So a couple of things. For me, I think I found my development in international affairs grow more when I was able to tie in my other passions into the work, right? So trying to think creatively about how the other things I was interested in, primarily soccer, but also just cultural exchange, right? And incorporating that into the thought. I mean, Miami really has been such a wonderful blessing because of the cultural diversity, and because we tailor our programs to the different cultures and communities that we serve. Like many communities, Miami is the geographics of Miami are culturally connected, right? There's a little Havana, there's a little Haiti. So we're serving those communities in very specific ways. And so being able to connect that would have been helpful. I think, and that was told to me, but maybe not as, maybe I wasn't as good at listening. The two other things I would say is push. I think I would have liked to have been pushed a little bit more for actually the PMF process, because I think from the outside, not knowing exactly what it was like to work in government, now having had friends who worked there, and there's just so many paths of what's available once you're in there. And yes, the PMF program is such a great program, and so had I known that a little bit more, I think I would have been really helpful. And then I hear this advice often in a whole slew of arenas, and I think it ties to the passion piece, but reminding
Santiago, could you just explain PMF, what that is?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the Presidential Management Fellows. And I think, along with what Danica was saying, it's I think an accelerated management program for international affairs professionals, right?
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, for all government officials. Affairs. Yeah. So you're in a non-compete status. I think it makes you more competitive for different roles within agencies. And but then, I thought that meant for sure either a life at an embassy or a life at in DC, and come to find a bunch of friends who work in Central California for the government through PMF, right? But then the last piece I'll say is this idea that you can kind of create an international component to any piece of your work. Yes, there are very formal, and traditional paths to take, but also reminding folks that you can be connected to that elsewhere. I serve as an adjunct professor at a university, and it's all for international social enterprise students, right? So I have students from Armenia, from Slovakia, from Sweden, from Nigeria, right? And so there's ways to make it happen even if you're stateside and not in DC. Yeah.
Good point. Danica?
I had something else I was going to say, but Santiago said something really good. When he was talking about the cultural component, I think paying attention to that, really digging down and learning a language. And it's not so much learning a language, but you can't learn a language without learning a culture. Anybody that's successfully learned how to speak another language without learning the culture. And that in my career has gone so far in terms of my being able to be successful in working with my counterparts overseas. No matter what my title is, if I'm in a room with the assistant secretary of so-and-so and I'm there, but I'm the one that speaks Russian and doesn't need the translator, it makes a whole world of a difference because I know exactly what's being said. I know what's going on. More importantly, I can have a conversation with the officials as we walk out of the room or at the reception later that he or she can't have without a translator. Yeah. And so as a government official and as a business person, you will probably always have a translator just because they need things to be official and on the record, right? So you're never going to necessarily need it to get through a formal meeting, but it's informal meetings. And a lot of cultures are very informal in how they really get business done in terms of it's over the dinners, it's during the receptions and that type of thing. So having language skill really helps with that. I'm not saying you got to speak every language on earth, but if you do want to stay within a certain region, then language skill is very important. And then I would say, Santiago mentioned that you can internationalize anything. But I think it's important that students understand that there are differences. Like, for example, international meaning like I have a job and I work with people from overseas is different than, for example, being an international business, which is different than being in international relations. And so depending on you, what you want to do, it can be very big or it can be very small. So if you're talking about just international relations, meaning government to government or government maybe to business that I do, it's big in that there's a lot of different things you can do, but it is actually very small, the number of people that have the sort of traditional international affairs, international relations jobs. If you are doing sort of government to government international relations, there's really no such thing as the broad international relations. Even people at the State Department have very specific jobs. As you know, Shamila, there's somebody whose only job every day is to look at endangered species in Africa, for example. I went to a meeting on Tajikistan once, and there were 20 different showed up. Each had a specific role. So if you want to,
I think we lost her or she's frozen again, right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I was gonna add one piece, Shamila. Everything Danica's sharing is totally resonating with me. And then this other thought that came up to me is like the less glorious side. I think referring students to either alums or professionals who can give some sense on like work permit and like tax implications of working in each country would have been like really, really helpful for me, because Argentina shifts all the time. There were other countries I was interested in working in that was difficult to actually work in. And so providing students with the resources to like be able to make informed decisions around that kind of information, I think would have been also helpful.
Good. Thank you. Danica, I wanted to give you a chance. You froze up there, but I wanted to give you a chance to finish your thought.
I don't know where I finished, but I just would say that I think a lot of international relations and international business and whatnot is much more specific than people think. That there's nobody that has a job doing international relations. Everybody does something very specific. Like they work for Boeing selling airplanes, or they work for the State Department, but their job is the Tajikistan desk officer, or they are at U.S. Embassy Bratislava, but they're just covering economics. Every single job is actually very specific. And so you have to also be careful and make sure that you are putting yourself on a trajectory, because it can be difficult to change up later without having to go backwards in terms of pay, for example. I mean, you can always change, but can you change at the same level? And the higher you get, the harder it is to make switches across areas. And so if you think that your version of international relations is I want to do business, well, then you don't necessarily major in international relations. You go and you get an MBA. And you take a language and you work your way up through a company. And then you eventually get to say government affairs or business development. So I think having more career not fairs, but panels where people like Santiago and I talk about our actual job and understand what you need for the type of job you want, not just what you kind of generally want to do. I think trying to identify a few specific jobs that you might want is actually very helpful, because I think when people actually figure out what they do want to do, there might not actually be that many places you can do it.
Yeah, so I'm really glad you said that, because when I talk with somebody who's interested in foreign policy, I'll ask them, where are places that you want to work? Because then Danica's right, you have to shape the advice around the specific organizations in some cases. And sometimes it's not actually like the international affairs discipline that's going to get them there. And related to that, I mean, I would say for the advisors on this call that, there's this idea out there that there's a traditional international affairs training. If you go to some of the IR schools that have been doing it for a long time, they'll say, oh, well, you need to you have to study macroeconomics, you have to do microeconomics, you have to do, a language, a region, and then some other, core curricular requirements. And each place is a little bit different. And I think that that's okay, because every place shapes like its own identity and it has its reputation, and the faculty help with that. But there are some things beyond the discipline that I would recommend that we focus on. And I want to hear what Danica and Santiago have to say about this. But I found that cross-cultural communication skills, whether it's like in your own experience of travel or like actually taking classes in like the School of Communication, very strong writing skills, like interdisciplinary humanities coursework. All of these things also give people an added edge in the workforce when you actually have to implement your knowledge, because there's just not that much training. Like it doesn't, like a lot of the education doesn't evolve the skills part of it. And I think that's what stands out at SAIS, is that there's a lot of skills training there, and there's an inconsistency across schools because for funding reasons, obviously. And what I would do if I was an advisor is encourage students to look for outside opportunities to develop those skills if it's not offered at your school, and to really think about like, oh, am I a good enough public speaker? Then if I'm not, then maybe I need to like really force myself to focus on X, What do you guys think? I mean, what has been your experience?
So it's very hard to find people that can write well. For academic purposes, where you can write all day and a 50-page paper is great. But most companies and most jobs, you usually get 1 to 2 pages max, maybe a few more to make your point. So writing skills and then briefing skills. And this is especially important in the private sector too, where you got to have to make like a quick 5-minute pitch or a PowerPoint presentation. In the government, you might only get 5 minutes to explain to somebody that has no idea, say, about Russia, what he or she is supposed to say in a meeting that starts in 10 minutes. You often don't get a lot of time. And so the ability to do what I call non-academic briefing, meaning when your audience is not happy to sit there for an hour and listen to your theory of relativity, but when you have a very short amount of time to explain what sometimes can be very complex situations and information, and the ability to synthesize. I think a lot of people come out of college, again, not being able to synthesize. And so exercises that require people to say, okay, take all the news that happened with Venezuela, over the weekend and make it into two paragraphs. Like that's the kind of skills that you don't necessarily learn in a lot of schools. You can learn that through a lot of mock things. You know how they have mock trial, like Model UN? I think those type of simulations and presentations are actually more valuable than long papers, because most people are not writing long papers unless they're a researcher or an analyst or that type of thing. So that would be one of the things I would offer. I don't know, Santiago might have different. He's a professor. So no, right?
I think the cultural competency that's been noted for sure, right? I mean, in terms of being able to be able to know the language, you got to know the culture. And so if there is a region that's of interest, I think really understanding that culture and that the history of that culture is really helpful. Because it can go from the conversations you're having with folks also to program design and what's most likely to succeed as an intervention in different instances. But 2 other skills I think that are just absolutely paramount are networking and partnership building. Like how to effectively network, because it is a skill, and it's one that sometimes as students, at least when I was a student, I wasn't as engaged in. As a professional, I've engaged in it significantly more, and it's just paid dividends in terms of being able to provide meaningful services and programs. And then partnership building, which is slightly different. Like you don't always need to build partnerships, but sometimes you do, and that's the most effective and efficient way to do it. And sometimes you just need to, have a relationship with an entity or an enterprise, as opposed to entering into formal partnerships. So really knowing the difference between a partnership and just an alliance or a relationship. And because there's negotiation involved, there's presentation, there's forecasting. I mean, there's a whole slew of things connected with building effective partnerships.
Can I tag on to what Santiago said about networking?
Please.
Most students don't also understand what they want to get out of networking, and also the difference between networking versus mentorship versus champions. That not everybody needs to be your best friend, mentor that's going to take you through it all and be there for the next 10 years. Sometimes you just need somebody to just introduce you to somebody and then you can move on. Some people are going to be there for the long haul. Some people can mentor you on, certain specific things, and some people will actually be champions. And depending on how busy those people are in your relationship, you approach those differently. But I get a lot of students for whom they want to call and they're like, well, just tell me about your life. I don't have that kind of time. Like, what are your questions that you have? What can I do for you? And then there are some days where I'm feeling generous and I do have the time and I'm happy to tell them my whole story. But most of the time it's like, go online and find out what the Commerce Department does and do some Googling first. Like, don't come to me and say, what does the Commerce Department do? Right? And so that's part of networking, right? Is if you're going to an event, look up some people ahead of time that you think you want to talk to and know something about them.
Yeah.
So when somebody approaches me and they say, I saw your bio on LinkedIn and I noticed that you do da-da-da-da-da, could I ask you a few more questions about, how I can best, learn to adapt, blah, blah, blah. That's when I'm much more willing to be able to talk to people. I can actually networking, how to networking, what you want to get out of it is also key.
Yeah, this is a really important point. I think we can all relate to what you said. So let me explain really quick, because we mentioned PMF. I want to explain some of those programs, and then folks in the audience will open it up to your questions. So feel free to start submitting them via the chat. But so one thing I experienced was, again, like I said, I started out in a different discipline altogether, but I didn't know about a lot of these programs. I didn't know that the PMF existed, or that there was, something at the State Department that's called Pathways. And it's if you are, graduate from undergrad, you get a job in the State Department and you kind of move up, and it's much more facilitated and managed. And then there are a few others for diverse candidates to get into the Foreign Service, like the Pickering Fellowships and Ringel. And I'm not going to go into them here for this audience, but what I would say is that it require a little bit of digging and research on the advisor side. If you have students who come from backgrounds that are not well represented in the U.S. government, the students should research, but also, on your end, like, it might not be that your school is actually has a strong international affairs program, and that's fine. And other schools, if they put the money into it over time, they're going to have a much more expansive network. And I've always found, that was one of my challenges, is I went to a different kind of school. I didn't go to Harvard. So everyone who graduated from Harvard, I was just as good of a desk officer as they were, but they had this whole other network available to them, right? And this whole other exposure. And that's really what a lot of young folks are up against when they're not coming from an Ivy League institution or a personal background that is familiar with the discipline. So, and thank you, Carmen, for sharing the information about Pathways. I myself was a Boren Fellow, and the Boren Fellows are paid fellowship money to study a foreign language and go live and study that foreign language in a foreign country. And it's a great program, and it paid for my grad school, and it got me into the government. That was how I got my job. So there are a lot of opportunities, and at the same time, these are competitive and they're timeline based. So if you're not prepared and you miss the timeline, then you miss the opportunity. So I think that's also one of the hard things is, Danica, your story is amazing, that you knew that what you wanted to do at such an early age, and then you followed through on it. And I wish we could all be like that, because then you can really take advantage of the system. So I am let me look do we have any questions yet? I don't see any. People are typing, so we will give you a moment. So in my day job, I'm the president of the American Pakistan Foundation. We just launched a mentorship initiative. We have a platform and everything. And we were advised to be very careful how we use the word, because people misunderstand it, and how we shape our program. So I think it's Danica, your point was very salient. Okay, let's see. Jessica Hernandez. Hello, my name is Jessica Hernandez, Salvadorian, recent graduate of International Affairs, International Studies major at Barry University in Florida. Although I did not do a minor in Latin American Studies, those are the classes that I mostly took. My question is, where can international students seek for internships? People doing OPT are not US citizens, and I applied to OPT because I need to have some experience in the field. Then I want to do a master's. What are the type of entry-level jobs that I could apply for, and what is the salary range I could expect? So there's a lot of questions in one. Santiago or Danica, do you have any experience or exposure dealing with this? I mean, Danica, maybe you guys have people who are doing OPT, like recent grads looking for jobs. I don't.
So no, we can't do non-U.S. citizens because it's government.
Can't. Not even for internships or anything.
Well, the problem is, again, if you were in sort of regular commerce, but in international, everybody's got a security clearance, okay. And so even the interns, while they don't have a security clearance, it's just there's no non-U.S. we specifically do. But that's when, and Santiago has the development background, but the World Bank, World Vision, CARE, I mean, there's huge international organizations that have offices both in the US, but also all over the world that have internship programs. And a lot of them are very formal where you might have to apply even a year out. But a lot of those organizations, like I said, are very big. Almost all the people that contract for like USAID and others. So I would look at a lot of those organizations are ones where actually you're favored if you're not a U.S. citizen. It's actually very hard sometimes for U.S. citizens to get jobs in some of those places because they want people from underrepresented countries.
Right.
So that would be a place to look. In terms of starting salaries, again, I've been so much focused in the government sector or in the private sector that relates to the government. I would say in international affairs, meaning in the government to government side, it's very difficult to get a job without a graduate degree. You pretty much have to have your master's already. And even with a master's, you're probably going to start at about 50, 60. I would say most of the jobs that are like in think tanks and things like that are non-master's required are like research assistant positions. And those can be like 40, 50,000. So I would say that's for DC. I can't think about any place else. So I will have much better experience.
Yeah, and Jessica, well, so Jessica's like right up the road then, because Barry's not too far away. So Jessica, a couple thoughts that come to mind. I mean, checking in with the Salvadoran consulate locally, because I think there's one in Miami. I'm almost positive there's one in. I know there's one in LA and I think in Houston, but maybe checking in there, that might be an option. I'm happy to share with you too. We're actually hiring for some roles at Catalyst. I can share that with you. So send me your info and we can make it happen. At least connect you to folks there. And then the other thought I had was Catholic Relief Services. I think has some interesting programs. I mean, like Danica, you were saying World Vision. I think like all those international organizations that have a footprint in El Salvador, I think would be really interesting places to start because, even if you're based here and there might be opportunities to work for them, especially now since most people are working remotely.
Yeah, I think on a tactical level, if you're a non-US citizen, like certain aspects of the professional development experience become more important to you. So networking for someone who's not a US citizen but wants to work in the US becomes all the more valuable because you're not going to be even able to follow any of these deadlines or deadline-oriented programs, right? So when I was at SAIS, I used to advise a lot of international students, and I basically figured it out that after a few years that they would come to me and I would say, you need to actually plan this out much earlier than say the others are doing because you have a limited scope of opportunity. And Danica and Santiago are right. Most of them would end up focusing on the World Bank and other organizations that have a global footprint. And it also can get, it could get easier depending on the political climate in the US. And what I noticed was in the past few years, the opportunities for international students, like upon graduation, just really shrunk significantly because of just the political climate in the States. And so anyway, that's also something you have to think about. So let's see, we've got another question. Let's see, is someone pregnant? What would Stan Holland is asking, what would you say is your value proposition for your organization. How do you add value to your organization?
So I can share from Catalyst. I mean, the value proposition of the organization overall is to create economic stability and wealth for individuals and families. We approach that through both direct service and systems level efforts, right? Whether they be programs or services or initiatives. We do things collaboratively. We do not know the answers, and we don't even know all the problems. So we a big part of our value proposition is community engagement, multi-stakeholder engagement to identify and solve these problems collectively. My particular value proposition, because I studied economics and development at my grad school at UCSD, I bring in a lot of like behavioral economic thinking into the program design for our clients and for those that we serve. So maybe if you read the book Scarcity, if you're familiar with that book, it came out a couple of years ago, but it talks about how anyone who experiences any kind of scarcity, you focus on something and then you forget about the medium and long-term pieces of that something, right? So you're more efficient at the end of a meeting and you're able to stretch the dollar farther when you have less of it. So we use that kind of thinking around the program design. So like we're going to start to text message folks on their payday because we know that they're more likely to save on payday as opposed to just telling them to save randomly when we don't know where it is related to their financial status of the day. So I bring in that kind of thinking into the program design, and I like it.
Great.
So I'd say for my organization, the two biggest value addeds are, one, we help small and medium-sized companies that don't have the ability to hire big consulting firms to do the research for them in terms of going overseas. So we're actually really good at being able to connect smaller companies to foreign markets. And then for the bigger companies, we have the value of being able to actually bring all of industry together to solve problems. So there can be times when, one company is having something, but we have the ability to actually take all of U.S. industry and the power of the government to help solve problems that in some cases are created by foreign governments. So one of the issues in my part of the world, in the former Soviet Union, is you have a lot of state-run economies or economies where 75, 80% of the economy is either owned outright by the government, owned or as a state-owned enterprise, or basically controlled by, say, like an oligarch. In which case, even a very big U.S. company can't take on an entire government by themselves, and a lot of times you need the government support. In terms of my value proposition, so one, I'm an economist, but two, I'm a regional specialist. And so there are very few people in the entire U.S. government who know more than me about, for example, the countries of the South Caucasus and Central Asia, so Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Russia, places like that. And so that's part of my added value across the whole interagency. My interagency, I mean the Commerce Department, the State Department, the Department of Energy, the Department of Treasury, is people come to me wanting institutional memory and knowledge about things and how to solve problems and the development and other challenges that we've had over the years of what I bring to the table. So I'll have people in the State Department call me and say, what should we do about XYZ in Uzbekistan? Because a lot of them actually move around quite a bit and don't necessarily know the players and whatnot themselves. So those are some of the examples.
That's a really good point. And it's important to draw that comparison between like the kinds of foreign policy practitioners in that, like if you're in the foreign service, like you're not actually going to be able to gain that level of expertise or specialty because that's not what's demanded of you, and the lifestyle doesn't enable it either. So Danica, here's a question for you from Jacques Cahindo. Could you please talk more about the security clearance process and how to obtain it?
So a lot of jobs require a security clearance. You can't obtain it without a job. I mean, accepted for a job, and then they will start the process. So it's nothing you can do without a job. But once you get it, you keep it, and unless it gets taken away from you, and assuming it gets renewed, you do keep it. If you think you want a job with security clearance, then what I would recommend that you do is make sure that you know every place that you've been overseas in the last 10 years. Write down the dates, where you lived, get addresses while you can remember it. And then any foreign-born or foreign resident people that you have significant and frequent contact with, make sure you know their name and date of birth and their address and where they live. because you're going to be required to put all of that, even just for a secret clearance. And the sooner that you can put that together, the better, because you don't want to wait to the last minute, because it can take like weeks to gather that kind of information. And also, I would say the younger you are, the better, if you know that you want a job with security clearance. While marijuana, for example, is somewhat legal most places, I would stay away from hard drugs. I'd be careful about people that you're associating with. If you are dealing with people from other countries, again, just be on the lookout for anything that might seem suspicious, that type of thing. And as Shamila said, in this current environment right now, even for people like me that have been in it for a while, like, you still have to constantly be reporting and that type of thing. So I would say that, if you want a job that's going to require especially like top secret and SDI clearances, it really is a lifestyle choice. It is a serious lifestyle choice. There are things that I don't do. There are people that I don't associate with, and places that I do not go, because I'm not ruining my career over this one thing. Like, so I don't date anybody, for example, that does any kind of heavy drugs, that type of thing, because those kinds of things will come back. So it is a sacrifice, but that's why a lot of people don't do it. But that's why those jobs also tend to be very good.
Yeah. No, that's a good, I haven't thought about it as a lifestyle choice, but you're absolutely right. And the folks, given all of the things that have happened in the past decade with regard to like cables being leaked and WikiLeaks, like the entire clearance process for people who already have clearances has become much stricter. And the example I like to give is, my husband has a security clearance for his work, and I had like many clearances at the White House and whatnot, but even when he was getting like updated for his clearance, because I was born in Pakistan and because I had, I was out of government and meeting with foreigners, it added a whole layer of questions to his update that we didn't anticipate. And it was much easier kind of when I got my clearance a decade ago. So you also have to be very aware of the times and what has happened, shifted for the government. Okay, so there's a question. I'm sensitive to time. We've got 8 minutes left. So let me, let's see. Okay, great. So the question is, thank you for sharing your experience and expertise. Besides pathways and fellowship opportunities through Boren, Rangel, critical language scholarships, can you share some skills building and research internship opportunities for undergrads, particularly first and second year students? One thing we didn't talk about was kind of how to expand your kind of skills base if you don't have it available to you. Internships are obviously one way to do that and get that kind of on the ground experience. So what do you guys think? What comes to mind?
Yeah, so one thought that comes to mind is encouraging the student, if they have an idea about what they actually want to research, to actually just go to organizations, whether that be a nonprofit or a for-profit with an international base, and pitch it to them. It's always easier to make those pitches when you have a connection or an introduction, hence the networking, why that's helpful too. But I can tell you from firsthand experience, I mean, Catalyst has been approached by both undergrad and graduate students for research project ideas. And, in certain instances we say yes, in certain instances we say no. And those that we say yes have been helpful and productive for both parties. And then if there's an opportunity also with a faculty advisor or student or professor rather, and doing it in tandem and approaching the enterprise together, that also helps. We've done a lot of really, really cool research on like financial decision making, for example, with universities that have incorporated undergrad and graduate students. So it's totally possible, but I would go in with the idea. Like, I heard this dirty little secret once that part of journalism is like you write the story for the journalists and then they'll, do what they need to. That's kind of the same, I think, with some research projects. Push the ball first.
All right. Danica,
so there are a lot of, there are some university-based think tanks that will frequently do calls for papers, and a lot of times there will be some funding associated with it. So it's not necessarily an internship, but you can actually apply for like $1,000 fellowship to do research, that type of thing. So I would look at those opportunities. But even if you have to work at Starbucks to pay the bills, there are actually smaller opportunities that don't give you full-time work, but that will actually pay you to do short-term research. The other thing I would say is if you decide to study abroad, or if your students decide to study abroad, encouraging them to get those internships while they're studying abroad. So, for example, when I was a student in Moscow, I was able to get an internship at a World Bank group because I was there, right? Like, how many people do you have that are like, look, I'm already here. I don't need a visa. I don't need a place to stay. You know, can I just show up? And they were like, sure. Now, in some cases, there's an economic thing in that, you know, you might already have to, again, have a place to stay and that type of thing. So you might not get paid that much or that type of thing. But if you're going to be overseas, take advantage of that and show up at the doorstep or call organizations that are doing work there and say, hey, I'm an expat, but I'm already here. You know, is it possible? Even if you can't do full-time work because maybe they can't pay you, even just coming in a couple days a week can be a great way to get experience.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Santiago mentioned about the just approaching organizations that you think you might be interested in, even if there's not a structured program. And this is especially applicable to folks who maybe are studying topics that are like underfunded or countries that tend to get ignored in policy or international affairs. And when I wanted to go to Pakistan when I was in, undergrad, and no one at my school was able to help me. And so I just kind of started emailing nonprofit organizations from my computer. And then finally I got response from someone, and that sort of got me on my path. And in hindsight, I'm like, oh, wow, that was kind of bold and maybe a little stupid, but it worked out. And I made a lot of mistakes, but sometimes you do have to create your own path, and there might not be a structured approach for it. And that's okay. I think it's a symptom of this being a little bit of it's the discipline of international affairs started out fairly rigid, I would say, and very elite, and it's growing and expanding quite significantly, I think, over the past few decades. And the fact that there are more people from different backgrounds have diversified it, and it's almost like the opportunities haven't caught up with the influx of different kinds of people, but you can make your way, basically, is what I'm saying. So let's see if we have any other questions. We have time for one more question, but it looks like somebody is typing. I'll give you a chance to chime in. Thank you. Everyone is very grateful for your feedback. So with that, Santiago and Danica, thank you so much for your wisdom. And I learned so much about kind of the work that you both do. Having been in like a national security space, I was just like kind of siloed in my little war on terror focus. And so maybe that's another point for the group, is that, there are all these little tiny communities within this small community of practitioners. There's a lot we can learn from each other. So, all right. And Carmen, thank you so much for your generosity in hosting us. And everyone, thank you for your patience with the difficulties. So, Carmen, would you like to say something, or do I turn it over to you?
Sure. Just a quick thank you to all of our wonderful speakers. And I look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. For the next part of our advisor week, we'll be having a conversation with Ambassador Harriet Alam Thomas and Dr. Francis Colon on why diverse voices are needed in the field of international affairs. So I look forward to seeing you all at Tuesday's workshop. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for having us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.